Good evening, and welcome to the April 2022 meeting of the Holland City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Freeman.
Here.
Peters. Corbin. Coronado. Arnshorst.
Here.
Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond.
Here.
Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. We're going to begin this meeting as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer this evening by our City Attorney Ron Vanderveen, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we would invite you to join us if you would like.
Thank you. Join us in prayer for what is. Our Father in heaven, we just give thanks to you for the beautiful city and peaceful country that we're able to live in today. We just have a heavy heart for those in Eastern Europe and all the difficulties and war going on there. Pray for your mercy on that situation. Pray for your guidance tonight in this meeting. Many things on the agenda that are important issues for the city. Need your wisdom and pray for that so that the best decisions are made for Holland. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next items on our agenda are our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine, and they have been reviewed by council previously as part of our council packet. And they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a member of council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on the regular agenda. But before I ask for that, Kathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4A, absences excused, Peters and Coronado. 4B, approval of minutes, April 13th, 2022 regular meeting. 4D, Holland Board of Public Works, bill of sale and termination of water utility easement for LG Energy Solution Michigan. 4E, Holland Board of Public Works, electric underground power line easement for 3601 John F. Donnelly LLC and West Shore Development. 4F, Holland Board of Public Works, declaration of surplus material. 4G, City Clerk, claims filed against the city. 4H, City Clerk, annual license renewals 2022-23. 4I, Fiscal Services, tax abatement, set public hearing for PA 198 tax abatement for strategic label at 72 West 64th Street, May 4th, 2022. 4J, Fiscal Services, tax abatement. Set public hearing for PA 198 tax abatement for Bypass International Corp., 72 West 64th Street, May 4, 2022. 4K, Fiscal Services, tax abatement. Set public hearing for PA 198 tax abatement for Tommy Car Wash Systems, 648 South Point Ridge, May 4, 2022. 4L, Fiscal Services. Set public hearing on May 4, 2022 to create an industrial development district, southwest corner of 24th Street and Ottawa Avenue. 4M, Fiscal Services, Holland Energy Fund proposed fiscal year 2023 budget, set public hearing for May 4, 2022. 4N, Management and Administrative Services, Downtown Group, DDA. Recommendation to allow restaurants in the FCTDT zone located on 8th Street to expand into up to 3 parking spaces for the purpose of dining.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Is there any member of the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none, is there any member of council that would like to have an item removed? Mr. Hoekstra.
Yes, I'd like to have item 4N, Management and Administrative Services, removed.
All right, and then that will move to place 12E 6.4. Is there any other member of council that would like to have an item removed from consent and placed on regular? And I suppose, Dave, you could do another one too if you wanted to. All right. Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council in regard to the revised consent agenda?
Move that we approve the consent agenda items for April 20th, 2022. 2022, except for N.
All right, moved by Ernst. Is there support?
Support?
Support by Vreeman. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Bird,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Corbin. Ernst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
yes,
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda is public comment. As part of the Open Meetings Act in the state of Michigan, we provide an opportunity for the public to address council at every one of our regular meetings, not just for city council, but also for all of our boards, committees, and commissions. They are all open meetings. This is one-way communication. This is an opportunity for you to address us in regard to any item that does not otherwise have a public hearing in the regular agenda. And there are a couple of items, actually on any other item that's not on the regular agenda, we'll provide some opportunity with the other items as well if there's a member of the public that would like to address in regard to those particular items. You have 5 minutes. There are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There is a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light means you're doing well on time. The yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and we are strict about that, so we appreciate you adhering to that. Please address council with your comments, and we also want to make note, please speak into the microphone because our meeting is being broadcast both live and being recorded, and the only way that the rest of the public can hear what you have to say is if you speak directly into the microphone. When you approach the microphone, please tell us your name and your municipality, meaning the city or the township that you live in. Now, having said that, is there anyone who would like to address council at this time? If so, please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Jim Newhouse, Holland, Michigan. Back in 2020, the city council adopted an anti-discrimination ordinance. By adopting this ordinance, you gave special rights to one group and limited God-given rights to other groups, especially nonprofit ministries that operate mostly for religious purposes. So I encourage you to make an amendment exception to this ordinance so that all groups and organizations can have their God-given rights to express freely what they believe. And just to clarify from the ordinance, section 25-4 states this chapter shall not apply to a tax-exempt nonprofit corporation that is organized and operated solely or in part for religious purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Shannon McKay of Holland, Michigan, and my husband Brian here. So hello, my name is Shannon McKay, and I'm a resident of Holland, Michigan. Thank you, council members, for your services to the community and allowing the citizens time to discuss the opinions they have toward the community issues. I'm here to share why the council should adopt this amendment of exemption from the anti-discrimination ordinance from August 2020. My husband has worked for the city of Holland, and I have done a lot of community work in the West Core neighbors and in 2012 for the Washington School neighborhood. I was a community connector through AmeriCorps with Good Samaritan Ministries. Part of my position was to meet the people of the neighborhood and build community with everyone, helping to bring people from all backgrounds or religious beliefs to help each other with asset-based community development. I was also a liaison for the Holland Historic District. While I was the connector in the Washington School neighborhood, people were able to express who they were and also learning the history behind meeting different people with different beliefs or backgrounds was not a bad thing. Remember, we are for our religious expression to be protected, not against a people group. I want all people to be able to express themselves or religion. Not being able to or not having it protected is like telling me not to have a personality. Each person can and should be allowed to express themselves and especially to have the right to protect their religious beliefs. Even if we don't agree doesn't mean we can't be friends. For the community of Holland, who know my husband and I, have said we are like the most changed couple they met. What I mean by that is they have witnessed how our hearts have changed. We are a new creation in Christ. We have friends in the LGBTQ community, and they know where we stand as Christians, and together we have helped neighbors and built community. It is about the hearts, not being against people. What would happen if Christian ministries in Holland, Michigan became extinct because they expressed their faith? Project the hazards of only offering social justice for those in need, with causes dependency on the government versus giving them a hand up only. That is what I did when I was doing asset-based community development in both neighborhoods on the south side of Holland. We have so many resources that neighbors could reach out and help each other by expressing their gifts and who they were to better their community. The Christian faith is built on loving your neighbor as yourself, sacrificial love. I can't do that if I can't express my religious beliefs because it's not protected. The love I show my neighbors and friends, even within the LGBTQ community, is the love of God by His Holy Spirit. It is also by Jesus and to show how He changes our hearts. People can try and stop us by saying we can't express our belief in how our hearts have changed and about our faith, but God has the final say. Nothing will stop us from loving all with the love of Jesus. Hopefully this will open the doors for our churches to freely share their faith in a new way without fear of being offensive and called intolerant. Speaking the truth in love is why our neighbors say, my husband and I are the most changed couple, and in our individual lives too. We show the love of Jesus because we can, and that is what it is about, Jesus. Thank you for your time, and may those who have ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. We appreciate your service to the community.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Ann Henrickson, Zeeland. Good evening, the City Council. Thank you for all you do for Holland and surrounding communities. I apologize for any inconvenience that occurred during the last week's meeting concerning the 2020 anti-discrimination ordinance. It was clear that none of you were aware we were planning on speaking for an amendment exemption. You were not prepared either to know or remember the ordinance details. Many in the community have looked at the ordinance because it is on the website in diversity, equity, and inclusion. When reading it closely, we determined that our religious freedom is unfairly portrayed in this ordinance. I contacted Keith, the city manager, 2 weeks ago to inquire what needed to be done to amend the ordinance. He said to informally request the council consider an amendment. It should be presented during public comment. I told him to let the council know that we intended to do this on April 13th, 20th, and 27th, the study session. He wanted to know who we were. We are the religious community of Holland and surrounding communities who are connected to Holland either by our businesses, churches, nonprofits, employment, properties, necessities, family, and friends. The voters of Holland elect you, but your laws and enforcement of these laws affect liberally and punitively anyone who has engaged in any way in the city limits of Holland. The original anti-discrimination ordinance was greatly influenced by comments from those outside the community who expressed they did not feel welcome. The families who spoke on April 13th are directly involved in the Holland city and their daily living. Again, I called last Tuesday, the 12th, to make sure that you knew we were coming and our purpose. I wanted to make sure our comments concerning this proposed amended exemption be made in the same integrity that the original anti-discrimination ordinance 2020 was made. In fact, I contacted Jen Adams, connected with her, and said I vowed that it would be the same integrity. I was told Keith was on vacation. I gave the secretary detailed information about why we were coming. She carefully took notes and said she would make sure to pass the information on. Matt alluded to a prior conversation he had had with Keith concerning my original phone call 2 weeks ago. You should have been informed. But we'll give it grace. It didn't happen. And so again, I apologize that you were taken unaware. I would suggest, council, you look closely at the ordinance. sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression is defined and detailed. Religion is not. Councilman Hoekstra, during the time of discussing the ordinance wording, questioned this. Mayor Box said defining it was not necessary because the Constitution protects the religious exercise. Exercise is one thing, but expression is freedom of speech. I go to the gym to exercise. This is for my own private improvement program, and this does not affect anyone else's health. This is why the word exercise is inadequate protection in the ordinance for religious groups. One people group may express their conduct beliefs, but the religious people group may not express the faith beliefs because their beliefs are deemed discriminatory. This is not fair. The amendment of exception read for Chapter 25-4, exemptions, does not include protection language for nonprofits. Therefore, we recommend that the council pass the following amendment of exemptions to a tax-exempt nonprofit corporation that is organized and operated solely and in part for religious purposes. Also, the mayor has recommended that the lawyer look at this ordinance to see if it is valid. I would say he should excuse himself from this. It came from him and the city manager from the Anti-Discrimination Commission of Michigan in Lansing. And anybody accused of discrimination, they would be, by this ordinance, sent to Lansing to be prosecuted. The lawyer here is not the prosecutor for someone who offends this ordinance. So I would say that you get an outside lawyer to look at the ordinance to fairly
Mr. Mayor, that's
see it.
5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yeah, my name is Chris House. I'm from Lowell, Michigan. Thank you for having me, members of the council, Mayor Box. I also just had a couple quick comments in regards to in support of adding an amendment to the 2020 anti-discrimination ordinance. In the name of diversity and inclusion, two things that many people, possibly such as yourselves, claim to champion today. Religious persons must be free to exercise their viewpoint. I think, as was just stated, it's important in our day and age to specifically mention the freedom of expression and not just exercise when free speech is such a heated issue these days. So I respectfully and firmly request that an amendment be added to that ordinance. Our society is growing more secular. Our government officials on the state and federal level are getting more secular at an even faster rate. Accordingly, they don't see a need for special religious protection. They don't see the great value religious institutions provide both in welfare support and civic and moral education. But there's a reason freedom of speech and religion were in the First Amendment, because they can be threatened in secular societies. The Western countries we came from were very intolerant, and this led to death and discontent. When sincere and often controversial viewpoints, as religious ones tend to be, are thought not important, is precisely when they most need to be protected. For example, some may believe certain forms of speech are harmful or unkind, such as a religious person believing that God views homosexuality as a sin. So suppressing that speech to them may seem better for a peaceful, more inclusive society. As nice as that sounds, it's superficial thinking. If you sincerely believe something and society tells you you're not allowed to share that thing on threat of punishment, that belief doesn't just go away. The individual becomes more and more convinced and frustrated and determined and seeks other means to promulgate that belief. in addition to that, faith-based groups need legal protection as they're more and more thought the enemy. If religious groups, nonprofits in Holland and the state of Michigan, if they're brought into court needlessly for simply stating their sincerely held beliefs in appropriate ways, they may go bankrupt. They may not be able to sustain themselves. And then our city and state lose the benefits of their loving service, generous financial donations, and important education on practical virtues. Thus not explicitly providing for religious expression in the 2020 Anti-Discrimination Ordinance in this increasingly secularized society, I believe is a mistake. In the long run, it will harm the groups it intends to protect, religious persons, and society. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Bob Ashby, Holland. I stayed here last week. I was the only one here for about the last half hour of council. So at the end of the council, when you were discussing this issue, it looked like to me that members had, that you didn't get the connection between why so many community members had spoken and exactly what they were concerned about in regard to Holland's 2020 Anti-Discrimination Ordinance. I appreciate the council's decision to contact the attorney to check into it. However, I was struck by the disconnect between how the council understood the issue and the depth of the actual citizen concerns. The fact is that sections 25, 3, and 4 offer no protection for a person of faith to express their lifestyle freely through their nonprofit or even for-profit business. The loophole is huge for persons of faith, and I want to try to explain this evening why. Living spiritually whole lives involves every part of a believer and everything we do, to include running a business. This is not about city covering its tail. The best way I can think to express this is to share with you some of the truths by which we are called to live our lives. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning. All things came into being through him, and aside from him, not one thing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the life shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it. And the Word became flesh and dwelled among us. And we beheld his glory, glory as of the only begotten Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. By him all things are created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether dominions or powers or authorities or rulers. All things were created through him. All things have been created through him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. President George Washington expressed the same right that we are asking you to specifically protect tonight this way. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable. In vain would a man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with a pious man, ought to respect and cherish them. A volume cannot trace all their connections with the private and public felicity, let it simply be asked where the security is for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation be deserted by the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in the courts of justice. And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on the minds of a peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality in exclusion can exist in exclusion of religious principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period for this evening. Next item on our agenda is and actually a very special thing, something we haven't done before with the Holland City Council. We have a presentation to City Council Challenge coins to former council members in recognition of their dedication and service to the community. We have Mike Trethui and Raul Garcia here, and Mr. Corbin and I are going to come around to the microphone to give these presentations. It is kind of an odd way to use this podium, and I know that Matt Van Dyken's probably cringing that we're not going to spin this around, Matt. Yes, you're very welcome. This is something brand new, and I think something really exciting and wonderful for this body to be doing. And I'm going to really limit what I have to say at this point because it was actually Scott Corbin who came up with the idea and championed it and saw this whole thing through every single detail. Scott did. And Scott, I want to turn it over to you so you can kind of explain the challenge coins, the reason behind them, the meaning that there are in them, and as much as you can for the public so they understand what it is that we're doing here.
So the challenge coin is a unique way to recognize our colleagues for the service that they performed over the past 4 and 27 years. Is that 25 years, long time, right? A lot of dedication, a lot of public service by both of these individuals, and they continue to do so. But it's a way for us to pay tribute to their service. We looked at a number of ways of doing it, and we thought this was the best way, something they could keep with them, put in their pocket, and then we can also challenge them at times. And part of that challenge is what we make the challenge, and it's a cup of coffee. You know, it's something that when we see them, if they don't have their challenge coin, we're gonna make them buy us a cup of coffee. So that's the first thing, right? That's kind of for our selfish reasoning. But secondly is that they can bring it out, and it has an inscription on it, and as well as some meaning behind it in what we symbolize on the front of the coin and also the back of the coin, so that they can remember their time of service, but also continue to communicate to the public what they did and how they did what they did with their service while they were here. This wasn't done just by me, as Mayor might have said, but I queried my colleagues on some prototypes. We even actually gave a prototype to them on the last day here, but the prototype wasn't sufficient. And so we communicated this to our colleagues here and asked for their input, and they gave their input, and we ended up with a coin, a real coin. So the purpose of the coin, as I've stated before.
You want me to hold it up? You want me to be your Vanna here?
You could be in my van, yeah. You could even go up and down the aisle, and like an auction house, you can go up and down and kind of show them and display them. So the purpose, a token of our appreciation provided to the City of Holland council member once their term of office has expired and left in good standing. The front of the coin has the background of City Hall with the date of Holland that was established in 1867, and at the bottom of the coin. The front of the coin also displays 5 colored tulips. The colors of 3 tulips represent characteristics of council. These colors represent the characteristics of council. So pink is celebrating community, white having honor and virtue, yellow is preserving hope for all of us, red having passion and adoration for our community, and purple exhibiting grace and leadership. The back depicts the Holland seal. Ingret, I'm not Dutch, so I'm trying to.
I'm
It's-
leaving
it's
you out
got
there all on that limb all by
Right-
yourself.
Right here, okay, it's got the, I don't wanna screw it up, but it says unity makes might, God be with us. Also includes the date of the city Holland was established. The bottom of the coin is a smooth surface to prevent the engraving of the city council member's name, their highest post on this council, and the dates of service. The edge of the coin is engraved with a sequential number between 0, 01, and 100. The 01 coin has been reserved for the assigned, for the coin designer, myself. Additional coins will be issued as board members leave the office in good standings. Each coin is logged into the register for historical reference to whom the coin was issued to. And today, we're going to present first, City Council Raul Garcia with coin number 3 for Ward 3 for his service between 2017 and 2021. And the second coin, coin number 2, excuse me, we've got kind of out of order.
Make sure you're in the
But
mic
we kind of got out of order there, but, yeah, you kind of explained this to the public, and I didn't listen, did I? But coin number 2 is going to City Council, former City Council Myron Mike Trothrui, Ward 1, Pro Tem Mayor from 1997 to 2021. I get the prototype back, so, all right. Would you guys like to have a word?
Wonderful. Thanks, Scott. Thank you for that, Scott, and thank you, Mike and Raul. We appreciate the dedicated service, and we hope that we continue to see you around the community as much as possible. I know Raul is with Habitat for Humanity, doing great service in the community, and Mike, we're trying to snag him and reel him in and make sure that he stays here in Holland, Michigan, but I don't know how successful we're going to be with that big grin on his face. We'll give him an opportunity, maybe second to last, to speak tonight. Next item on the agenda is special order of the day, public hearings, urban cooperation agreement with Fillmore Township. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. For you all, you've heard this presentation a few times before, but tonight is the night where we have both the public hearing and recommended action from staff adopting a resolution that would put into place this urban cooperation agreement. Let me take a step back just a moment to give you some context on this. A continuing goal given to staff and myself by council is partnerships and relationships with our surrounding governments. In this case, we've had an ongoing conversation with Fillmore Township really probably since I've gotten here, maybe 3 years worth of their interest in extending water service to portions of Fillmore Township. You're going to hear about that momentarily with a tie bar agreement that Mr. Dave Koster is going to talk about with BPW. But really what this does, an urban cooperation agreement, is really the friendly way, if you would, of annexations, which sometimes happen also. But an urban cooperation agreement is an agreement between two governmental entities which transfers an amount of property from one jurisdiction to another. In this case, the recommendation is approximately 156 acres of land in 3 primary larger areas as depicted on in both the agreements but also on the screen in front of you. That in conversations with Fillmore Township, what we really talked about is areas that really kind of lend themselves to being eventual industrial type areas and properties, at least large tracts of those, maybe not every parcel within there. And typically industrial properties really need to be in municipalities with full level services like the city of Holland has, and not in a township such as Fillmore. This was something that has a long history between the city and Fillmore Township back in the 90s, where this was talked about at one other time. It was set to go through, and then there was a referendum that stalled that process, and it really lay dormant for then many decades. Last night, Fillmore Township, as has been communicated to you through this process, we've definitely been in communication with them. Fillmore Township considered this last evening themselves, and as communicated before, is continuing to move forward with this process. The recommendation for you tonight is to enter into this urban cooperation agreement. Really what it lays out is that the areas as depicted in blue would come into the city, for all practical purposes would be provided services and be taxed at city rates. And the advantage to the township is that for a period of the term of agreement as outlined, Fillmore Township would continue to get the tax rate that they get today based upon the value of the properties that are there today. So there is a referendum period should you take action on this evening that gives opportunity by state law for residents to gather signatures and petition against this transfer. But otherwise, should you take advantage and approve this, and Fillmore would do the same without a referendum, then at the end of that referendum period, then this transfer would go into place. Again, Mr. Koster is going to talk about kind of a companion, a tie-barred agreement of the water service agreement. One only occurs if the other is ultimately executed. And I believe with that for 15-year term agreement, that's what I would present on this evening, and would definitely answer any questions of council that you have. And also, this is a public hearing this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from council members to staff? Don't see any. I will now open it to public hearing. Same rules apply with the public hearing as they do with our public comment period. I do, just for whoever comes up there first, I think I did turn off the microphone, so you'll want to hit the little button on it up there. But limited to 5 minutes on this subject only. And again, it's one-way communication. We don't answer questions during this time period or engage in conversation or discussion, and be aware of the three lights: the green light, the yellow light, which gives you 1 minute, and the red light that says your time has expired. So if you'd like to come forward and speak, sir, yes, definitely. And please tell us your name and your municipality, please.
Push the little button.
Oh, nope, it's all set now.
Oh, it's all
Yeah, Ms. Van Beek took care
David
of that.
Herman, Holland, Michigan. I live in the Links at Rolling Meadows, which I believe, I was going to ask what the boundaries of those blue areas are. Is that lower blue area along 46th Street? And
We don't answer questions at this time, but I think that staff may be able to answer that when we get into the discussion on
okay,
this. So
well,
we'll be
we're
aware of
concerned
that.
about the control of water in our subdivision. We have a condo community right on the border of, I believe, on that blue area. And we are hopeful that Holland will have control of that. We think you do a great job with planning. And we wouldn't want to see any development that Holland is involved with. So we hope that whatever happens with that piece of land down the future, you will have access to the planning that Holland has done and be able to control the water rights. So I'm not sure if that's included in the proposal or not, but maybe you could answer that question.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council in regard to this particular item? Definitely, please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Jim Seabright. I live in Fillmore Township. I'm one of the 3 residents on 147th Avenue that are affected by this. All we've heard about is what it's going to do for the township, and we were at the meeting last night, and tell you the same thing I did them. I'm extremely disappointed in the lack of transparency. if this negotiation has been going on for 2+ years, why are the only 3 residents that are affected by it not informed until 2 weeks ago? I think the water agreement is a great thing. It's good for everybody. However, I didn't ask to be drawn into the city. I moved to the country so that my kids could have room to play and ride their dirt bikes and not have to worry about disturbing people. And now my taxes are going to go up. I have no say in that. I don't feel that that's fair because their millage rate is nearly double what ours is currently for supporting mostly services that I don't use. And then we're concerned there's no, I haven't seen a representative from the developer, so we don't know if it's going industrial or if it's going residential. We've heard both. I personally would prefer industrial, but if it does go high density residential, like one of the rumors we heard, I'm curious what they're gonna do to preserve our current lifestyle. Are they going to put up a nice barrier so we don't have to worry about noise or trash or people wandering through our yards or our own activities disturbing them? So that's all I have to say.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council on this particular item? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yes, I'm Courtney Garber, and I am in Fillmore Township currently, also one of the properties that are being annexed into the city. As Jim stated, we are in agreement that the water rights seem like a wonderful idea. We're not opposed to any of this. What we are concerned about is how this is going to affect us. It seems like it's beneficial for the city. It's beneficial for Fillmore Township. We see no benefits for our personal families, for how we use our land currently. How are we going to be regulated going forward? How is this going to affect our taxes, property values, all these different issues? And we know nothing, and that's scary. You know, we buy a home thinking we're going to be able to afford to live there. You factor in your taxes, you factor in your mortgage payments, and now because of this agreement, we don't know anything. And it's like Jim said, we don't know what's happening behind our homes. I'm a homeschooled mom of 4 children. We're home all the time. We want to feel safe. We don't want to live in the city, but we understand we are now going to. And so I guess I'm just asking that you'll take into consideration that, you know, maybe there can be some grandfathering in. Maybe we can have something that will still give us our country lifestyle, but in, you know, Holland City. And so that's what I'm asking, that you'll just consider how this is going to affect our family, affect our children, affect our finances, as this isn't something we asked for. It's something that's being pushed onto us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council on this particular item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Move that we approve.
Moved by Hoekstra. Let me get see if there's support on that motion first round, and then I'll get yours. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Corbin. Question statement from Mr. Vanderveen, City Attorney.
Just want to make sure on the motion and to clarify that the motion has to be, of course, subject to approval by the city attorney. And then secondly, conditioned upon there not being a petition for a referendum during the next 30 days as well. That needs to be part of the motion. The other thing that I think we should be clear on is this is only the urban cooperation agreement. It's not the water agreement. The report does mention documents, plural, so I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Okay.
I was assuming all of that.
You were assuming all of that as part of your motion. Were you assuming that as part of your second as well, Mr. Corbin?
Correct, as it's presented by the staff.
All right,
thought so.
great. Thank you. Thank you for making that clear for us, Mr. Vanderveen. Any discussion by council members? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Vreeman,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda, item number 9, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing a public comment period for people to speak to us directly during council meetings, we also provide you the ability to give electronic comments through our email address, publiccomment@cityofholland.com. That's publiccomment@cityofholland.com. And we gather those communications in the time between our regular meetings, and then we accept them into the record at our regular meetings. We do not read them out loud, but rather accept them into the record. And I do believe that we do have one e-comment this meeting. And what is the pleasure of council in regard to the e-comments?
Move that we accept, Move that we accept the e-comments into the public record.
Moved by Aaronsource. Is there support? Support. Support by Byrd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, item number 12A1, retail water agreement with Fillmore Township. Mr. Van Beek, I believe that this was referred to previously.
Yes, and I'm going to invite and ask BPW General Manager Dave Koster to come up and describe the work that's been done on this. And thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. Good to be with you this evening. As has been outlined already, I think in some detail here, part of this discussion with Fillmore Township involves some offering of municipal services to areas of Fillmore Township in exchange for the urban cooperation agreement and transfer of some acres of land into the city of Holland. And so I want to thank, first of all, Ron Vanderveen, City Attorney Ron Vanderveen, for his assistance in working with the township on an agreement, but also John Van Uffelen, former BPW employee who's back with us under some contract services to put together a form of an agreement which models very closely after the agreement that's in place recently with Park Township. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the details associated with that agreement. First of all, really it's important to talk about the location of water service that's being offered. The parcels in question here that are associated with the urban cooperation agreement are all part of an area north of 196, and therefore also what we're looking at for the water agreement is to be able to extend an offer of availability of retail water to areas of Fillmore Township that again are north of 196. So when you look at the map that's on the page here, you can see that the city of Holland is kind of shaded out in its that tan background there, and then you see a dashed sort of purple line there that outlines areas all the way down along Grasscop Road and then all the way over to the edge of 196 that are part of Fillmore Township. Everywhere that's north of that 196 or I-196 line are part of the expanded territory. Now you also see a little bit of a hook kind of down Blue Star Highway. That is part of an existing water agreement that was put in place in 2010. That service territory will remain in effect for this new agreement should it find favor with you and also the township and a successful urban cooperation agreement be put in place. What we are, and I think the question came up about control and also looking at the terms of the service here. Just a couple things about that. First of all, this is a 30-year agreement that is being proposed. It would have an automatic renewal once the agreement reaches 10 years left on it, unless either party decides that they want to move for a termination of that agreement. That renewal would be for another 30 years, and then for subsequent terms that would repeat itself. As far as the actual requirements, then once this agreement is in place, it really is incumbent upon the township or a developer of new property to bring the actual extension of water mains to those new areas. That is often done either by the jurisdiction through an assessment process or through a developer as part of the upfront cost of developing a neighborhood or a new development of some kind. Those new extensions will have to be done to the specifications of the Board of Public Works in terms of the standards of the water system. Once those extensions are made, underneath the water agreement, they would be dedicated to the BPW for its operation and maintenance, and then all, replacement of infrastructure once infrastructure wears out. The rates that we would charge for service would be uniform with all areas that we currently provide retail, including the City of Holland. So the entire City of Holland, Park Township area where we provide retail, and this new area in Fillmore would all have the same water rates for those. The only exception to that would be is if there is a system that has been put in place that would be incorporated into our service territory that was not built to our standards, and we elected to go ahead and serve it on retail, you know, we could actually put a surcharge associated with that to recognize the fact that that non-standard system may have a higher burden to us to maintain going forward. There's an exclusivity provision in here that the BPW would be the only provider for municipal water service in this area. And there'd also be some limitations in terms of the hookups that without our approval, there could be no larger than a 2-inch connection, and there should be no connections for agricultural purposes, again, without our approvals. The question was asked about the area of the Rolling Meadows. That area is already within the City of Holland shaded area that is just kind of south of, I think, 147th and just a little bit west of the highway right there. So that is currently already a shaded area. So the extensions that are available to Fillmore would be just to the west of that, up to that purple line there. And again, you know, our standards of water service, you know, would hold in terms of any quality of the actual infrastructure that would go in on that. So those are some of the details and provisions of the water agreement as they have been negotiated at this point, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the water agreement.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Coster. Any questions from council members? Go ahead.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki. Yeah.
So this, did you have? This retail agreement, the cost to everyone is the same as you're charging city residents and Park Township residents?
Correct. I mean, there's an upfront, you know, if there's an extension of service to an area, that's something that the township will work out through an assessment process with those owners of property in those areas that are being provided service. But once there is a connection to us, then the same retail rate is paid by anybody in that area is also paid by the residents of the City of Holland and businesses of the City of Holland.
Thank you.
Great. Did you have a question, Lynn?
I don't think this has to do with the water agreement. I'm going back to what the resident said about the 3 properties. Now, I know this had to do, maybe it had to do with the urban agreement. So if we want to finish this and get back to that, that's okay. But I was just wondering if you could respond to that. How these will affect, these agreements will affect those property owners.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that right now?
Yeah, just a couple things since I was asked. The one on the water and kind of the development of water, and in this case, water not provided water through pipes, but water as far as overland water. Whether you develop in the city or the township, there's state law that regulates, and you need to take care of that water. And as Brian White knows, there's increasing regulations from the state that flows down to all municipalities. So anyone that would develop land that's actually in the township, obviously that needs to be handled by the township, but they have rules and regulations that require taking care of that water. So that was one question. The other, as far as just information, I'll just say a couple things. One, we didn't make any contact with any of these properties going through this process because it's not appropriate for the city to contact residents and properties that, at least in the process, are not part of our jurisdiction. I hesitate to say a little bit, but I think it can be clear, like in my presentation, the intent of ours, and if you take a look at the zoning of the city in these relative areas and the properties that we're taking a look at, they adjoin industrial property in the city. And really the conversations with the township that we looked at, we were looking at properties that really the advantage to those properties and to the city is that the vast majority of those would be developed likely into industrial properties. I hesitate to say that because that's not in front of you tonight, and only should this go through would then the city, through the planning commission, go through a process of taking a look at and then ultimately determining the zoning for those properties. But I think it's fair to say in the context of what we were looking at, we were really looking at properties that from kind of a master plan perspective, and when you take a look at where they, would join into the city, and you take a look at past examples of 425s, I think there's a likelihood that the staff recommendation is that they would be industrial in nature.
Quincy, did you have something to add? Yes, sir. All right. Any other comments, questions for staff from council members? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to open this up also for the public. If anyone has a comment that they would like to make to council in regard to this particular item, you have an opportunity to do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close that comment period. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the retail water agreement with Fillmore Township?
Motion to accept 12.A, Board of Public Works Retail Water Agreement with Fillmore Township as presented by staff.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Vreeman. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin?
Yes.
Aaronshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 12E 6.2, Finance, proposed fiscal year 2023 budget for review and set public hearing for May 4, 2022. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will be relatively brief on this. There is no shortage of thorough documentation under this item, and really just procedurally, right? You're setting a public hearing for May 4, and tonight, when we adjourn this meeting, we're actually going to go upstairs in the training room and have the first of back-to-back nights where we present to you much more detailed information on the big binder, both on all of these budgets, the larger ones that represent all budgets, including, for example, the Board of Public Works, but then also go into like the general fund for the city, which are more of what people think of the traditional services. So we will have those meetings right after this meeting in the training room, and then tomorrow night again at 6 o'clock that are obviously open to the public. But what this action in front of you right now is just sets the public hearing date for May 4, at which point too we would have a recommendation and hope that you would take action on all of these budgets.
Great. Thank you. Questions from council members to staff? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of council in regard to setting the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget?
Move to set that meeting to take place on May 4.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Item 12E 6.3, Holland City-Owned Broadband Resolution Approving Submission of Bond Proposition to Electors. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you. I'm going to do an introduction tonight, and then I'm going to ask Dave Koster to come back up as broadband is another one of those really recommendations of a fourth utility that we have been operating, but we're making recommendations tonight both to a business plan, but then ultimately for a resolution that you would vote upon that would put a ballot question in front of the voters in August. Just by means of background, first, thank you to BPW staff, city staff, a very comprehensive set of representatives from the community, representing education, business, nonprofits, and others that have really been advising Dave and I for a period of a couple years now on what is the best way to respond to the challenge that council has given us as to taking a look at broadband specifically as a way to expand the possible services that we could give to the community. We were very thorough in going through and doing our research on this. I don't want to take all of Dave's thunder here, but he's going to do a PowerPoint presentation that talks about the research that we've done, the surveys that we've done, the different models that we took a look at as far as the business plan of what exactly is the recommended way that we would go about providing that broadband. And then ultimately the decision, the inflection point tonight of, okay, if you have a plan of how you want to deploy something, you also have to have a plan for how you're going to pay for that. And while there is eventual ongoing service costs for rates, really the question before you tonight is approving this resolution that would put before the voters a way to pay for a bond that would pay for that upfront capital cost of building this open infrastructure that we're excited about. So this is the result of a lot of planning, a lot of work, and I think this is really kind of a big point in the history of the city as far as an opportunity that we get to put, with your approval, put in front of the voters to educate the voters on this, and then ultimately see what their will is as it relates to the opportunity. So again, my thanks to so many people, least of which is not Mr. Dave Koster, who has really led this effort at the BPW. And Dave, why don't you take it away, and I'll give you the magic clicker here.
The one I was going to come see you about. So. Thank you, Keith, and Mayor, members of City Council. Nice to be with you again. We are very excited this evening to be at this point. Very important initiatives have been accomplished in our city over the years because of the close collaboration of the staff of both the BPW and the city, but also, and probably even more importantly, the robust stakeholder engagement that we've had as a community that help us find the best way forward, whether it's on energy issues with our community plan and the development of Holland Energy Park, whether it's in terms of waterfront redevelopment. These are just a few of the items over the last decade or so that we have been tackling and doing a really important work and really good work for our community. You all have prioritized broadband, fiber optic broadband for our community and access to it because you have, I think, identified it as being something that helps differentiate Holland and helps prepare us for the future and helps lift us up as a community. And there's so many different things that can be done with that in the future beyond what it is important for today. You've seen it as an essential service. The Holland BPW has been providing broadband for many, many years, but our service has been really, to a great extent, connected to some of the larger businesses and key institutions in the community, as opposed to something that's more universally available. We did a downtown project a few years ago to see if we could kind of grow that business. We were excited about the results of that, but we know that there are some impediments to being able to deploy that throughout the community in a way that is going to reach everybody in a cost-effective manner, as well as something that could provide an open access network, provide a lot of different choices. We were asked to study that. We were asked to go back and take a look at what some alternatives could be to ensure that we could do that. And we're excited about being with you tonight to be able to share some of the results of that and a recommendation going forward. The initiative in front of you tonight, Holland City Fiber, is a plan to make available on a universal basis this high-speed fiber optic connectivity available throughout our entire city, past every business, past every resident of the city of Holland, and find a way to lower the bar of cost and access for that type of service. Again, your prioritization was to make it universally available, not just pockets in our city, to really break down the digital divide that exists, to improve access, to increase choices of suppliers of different services, and to overall differentiate our community by positively impacting quality of life and economic development. And you empowered us as a staff and a supporting task force that Keith referenced earlier to go out and to engage with our community and to seek solutions to achieve the goal. And we did that. We did that in a lot of ways. We went out and talked to about more than a dozen key constituency groups in the community, talking to education, talking to entrepreneurs, talking to non-profits, talking to healthcare, really talking to a lot of different groups within the community to get their impression of what potentially community-owned fiber optic broadband might mean to improving the services that they provide and the ways that they provide it. We got a lot of really good feedback from that. We also, using the Frost Research Center, engaged the entire community. We had a huge response. We put out a lot of surveys on a lot of things, but this is something that really resonated with people just based upon the amount of response that we got, the amount of surveys that were turned in. And so we have a pretty high level of confidence that the numbers that are here are representative of how our community is feeling about it. And three main takeaways that come out of that survey is that people either agree or strongly agree that broadband is a core utility service. They look at broadband, fiber optic capability, the access of information from the internet and being connected to data sources as being on the same level of importance as water, sewer, and electricity. It's that essential, that much part of what's needed as a basic right for people in our community. They also felt very strongly that a community-owned broadband would help ensure that everyone in the community had access to that and could benefit the community greatly as a whole. And in order to make that happen, they also agreed, or strongly agreed, 65% of them, that a investment, a commitment on a community level, such as a millage, could be necessary to ensure that we have a successful deployment and a successful venture of building that community-owned broadband. So very clear results without a whole lot of description about what the details of that plan were, what the level of millage would be, what the service costs would be. Just the feelings that people have about that were strong regardless of knowing that. We have done a lot of work since that time to look at some business models around what the broadband service would be, but I think it's also important to start out with the basic premise of the solution that we're proposing at this point. The term open access has been used, but I don't know if everybody really understands what that means. The analogy that we have used often is one of roads. And the pictures that are down on the lower right here as you're looking at the screen indicate kind of a relationship here when you think about the fact that we all at some time have probably gotten a package delivered to us, whether it's FedEx or UPS or Amazon or whoever it might be. There's trucks rolling down our road all the time in our community to deliver services and to deliver products to us. They don't all build their own road to get here. Imagine the amount of investment that would take and the amount of recovery that investment that would be there in order to see that kind of situation. Instead, the city does what it does really well, and it builds the infrastructure to allow commerce to happen, to allow business to happen across it. And that's the approach of open access here, where you have one investment from a community controlling its own destiny as to the level of capability of that system, to the level of performance of that system, to the strength of that system overall, and then making it available, saying, okay, we made the investment, we want the private sector now to come in and provide solutions to you. Content, data, phone, whatever it might be, utilizing that network to provide solutions to you that you want to have, giving people choices over the kind of service that's there. This is good in that it opens up options, it promotes competition, and competition should help improve the service level and the cost of those services over time. So that's the proposal that's involved with that. Now, how do we achieve that? As a community, we come together and we make an investment collectively to ensure that fiber goes past every home in our community. As a community, we make that investment. Once that's made, then there's a choice of whether you want from going past your home to actually go to your home and the service that you would take. So what we're talking about tonight is an approval of a concept for a millage and a bond to support roughly a $24 million investment to run fiber past every home and business in the city of Holland. After that point, everything is a choice for every resident and every business in the city as to whether you want that to go from the street to your dwelling and whether you want to subscribe to service. Just by making the $24 million investment, we help reduce the cost threshold significantly in terms of the service. And we're talking about building something that is capable of 10 gigabits per second, even though the basic offering that we would have would be 1,000 megabits or 1 gig symmetrical, meaning the same speed up as it is down for every resident and business in the city of Holland, making that available. So, again, looking at the cost structure of this, it's about $24 million for everything that is depicted in the orange boxes here. The actual conduit and fiber infrastructure going past every home and business, the electronics that support the operation of that network, and then the drop to the house. The analogy here is sort of like a water line going through the street and then the service line to your home for water. Same thing on fiber optic. You have the network passes, which are the distribution infrastructure going past every home, and then you have the drop into the home to the dwelling. That would be something that would be recovered once somebody makes an election to have it go to their house, could be recovered over a long period of time, meaning like a 10-year recovery on that. When you look at how that breaks down then, and there's a lot of information in the actual attachments that get into a lot more detail on the breakdown of these costs, as well as some of the operating models from a profit and loss standpoint. But just for those at home, kind of breaking it down into the different elements of the community level investment versus the actual service. Again, what we're talking about tonight is moving forward with a ballot initiative that would ask the voters in Holland to approve a millage that would support a bond to pay for that $24 million investment. It would have an estimated first year cost of 1.5 mils for a home. But based upon the analyses that were done by our financial advisor, as the debt starts to go down on that over time, so does the millage rate. And the average over the life of that bond is about a 1.12 mil millage on estimate. That's just the investment then for the community to ensure that fiber is going past every home and every business. Once you elect then to actually take service, the drop is recovered over a long period of time. That's the gray bar there. That's $7 a month to recover that over a 10-year period of time. The operations and maintenance and the actual internet service offering combined to another $35 per month for 1,000 megabits per second, 1 gig symmetrical service. That is the element, the basic elements of the offering, at this point. But again, it's an open access system. So in addition to this potential, there are many other providers who could bring services across that. If somebody wants to stay with their incumbent provider, there isn't anything that prohibits that from happening. They may stay with their provider of service today. Doesn't move anybody away from service in the city of Holland. It provides another offering that's there. And once we build it, we hope that incumbents that are in the area, as well as many others, would choose to utilize this system to bring offerings to the residents and businesses in the city of Holland. So again, what's not on here, I'm kind of surprised. I must have missed a slide on there. One of the things I think that I would also, sorry about that, Keith, I just threw your slideshow off. The other thing I would mention is that some of the time frame elements, one of those things is that with your vote tonight, it would start a process for a ballot in August. August 2 is what's being proposed at this point. And then, should that actually find favor, there would be engineering work done and the solicitation of bids for equipment and services to install. We would be looking at getting started in calendar 23, and it would be a 2 to 3 year time frame for the rollout of this to get past everybody, but we would start bringing people on to the system as that is through your particular neighborhood. So there would be a phasing plan and a lot of communication about that. As I mentioned before, the first slide showed hollandcityfiber.com. Just looking at our group here, it's ready to go, I think, at this point. So hollandcityfiber.com is an area where you can go to find out information. There are frequently asked questions on that site. We will keep information live and updated on there for residents that want to check in on this and learn more about the initiative and what it means to them. So with that, I don't know, Lynn, do you want to speak to the bond at all, or did things get covered that? Okay. Yeah, if there's questions about the actual debt offering and millage or anything on the actual business plan, I, Keith, or Lynn would be happy to answer anything.
Great. Questions from council? Quincy.
Yes, just a couple of questions. Can you elaborate more on the 10 gigabits for those who don't understand that terminology?
Yeah, so we've got some really good information again on our web page as it relates to what that means, but that would be actually, instead of 1,000 megabits per second, it would be actually 10,000 would be a 10 gig. Now, that's what we're looking at building it capable of, and I'd probably be looking at Pete over here as to give me an example of download speed for those that, you know, what are you actually, and he's got a pamphlet here that helps people with that, so I'd ask Pete Hoswell to come up and put it in terms of movies or other content that you can download at those kind of speeds.
Sure, thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. We have a pamphlet that's coming out of part of our information and education program that you'll be seeing more of here over the next few weeks and months up to August. This information is also on the website that Dave mentioned. But an example is a typical movie, a 4K movie is about 11 gigabytes of data. That would take, with a 10 megabit internet connection, which is a pretty slow internet connection, but many people in our region of the country live with 10 megabits and less, would take about 2 hours and 43 minutes to download. A gigabit would take about 1.5 minutes. So it's significant performance improvements. Yep. Thanks.
Then my next question is, you spoke of keeping your current service providers.
Is the microphone
Quincy,
on?
can you? Yeah, sorry.
You spoke of keeping your current providers, right? How would that affect the other providers having this in our community?
Well, obviously, it's going to provide options for customers in the city of Holland, right? And I think, you know, that just goes whether it's bringing different providers across our system or whether somebody is maintaining their relationship with their incumbent provider. Just having that option there, I think, is going to provide, you know, some level of competition to those providers that's going to help them stay sharp, you know, on that as well. So I think there's benefits, you know, to the relationship that they have with their provider just by having another option that's there. But again, this is not something that is mandating anybody change that relationship with their provider if they want to stay with what they have. The only thing that everybody commonly has a responsibility for underneath the plan, and if you move forward on that and the voters do, would be the millage associated with the actual bond to support the $24 million deployment in the community to pass everybody. But after that, everything else is electable at that point.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead, Nikki.
Yes, and I would hope that BPW's reputation with everything else would continue with this. I mean, that's what you have going for you at this point. But I have a question. You had a little table that the cost to a homeowner would equal $42 a month. You had a $7 pass fee, et cetera, et cetera. Is that pass fee part of the hookup? I mean, a hookup would be like $800 for a homeowner.
Yeah,
Do they
the
have to
drop
pay
is an $800
drop.
The drop is an
sorry.
$800 estimate for that, and we'd be looking at some sort of uniform cost that we would do, because not every home is exactly the same, but we probably would apply something on a uniform basis. But what we're saying is, instead of making that an upfront payment, that is an option if they would like to do that. Otherwise, we would have an option of recovering that over a longer period of time to try to ease the cost of it.
It would be a barrier to some people. And I have a concern from a resident who said, Laketown Township instituted a 1.66 mil for 16 years. The township owns the system, and it appears that Comcast runs the cable with no hookup fee. Is any of that, I mean, I have no
Yeah,
knowledge.
I don't know that there's a millage in Laketown Township to support a broadband network there, so I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, but Comcast does go into some of the
There's some parts
areas.
of Laketown Township, but again, I think as you've seen in a lot of areas where there's some issues of density, that's not the entirety of the township. But
Would you be afraid, I was interested in your response to Quincy, the competition that may result, which is good, we like competition, that might have them improve their business models to your perhaps detriment?
Well, again, this is why, what we're saying is, I think the best model that as a task force and as a staff, we believe very strongly in the open access model of one common road that the city can control its own destiny and make its determination of the performance of that. But again, we're not doing something that is going to force a change in the relationship that somebody has. Now, our hope is, that many different providers, including incumbents in the area, would see value in utilizing that as a mechanism to reach customers, long term. But if they choose not to, I do think that having the presence there, is a value. Now, I think to our situation, obviously, the more that we have utilizing the network helps economy of scale of the operation as well. But we do a lot by making a commitment on a community level to fund the investment in the infrastructure to de-risk it as a community, and we're making that collectively. That's why the proposal in front of you is to have that be put to the community to say, we're willing to step up and make a community level investment.
I think the pandemic has shown that there's an equity issue here, so thank you. I applaud what
Thank you.
you've all done. Thank you.
Mr. Hoekstra.
Yeah, just one bit of a clarification as we move toward making a motion here. Just to understand clearly, what we're going to be asked to vote on is wording for issuing bonds up to $30 million, correct?
Correct.
And that is the extent of the intended motion.
Yeah, there's some elements to that are involved in the ballot language, and the ballot language has a resolution that's associated with it, which is in your packet. It does have a $30 million number on that. It does have a first year estimate of 1.5 mils and an average of 1.12 mils for that period of time. And again, part of that is looking at the fact that there's some variability, there's some supply chain, type of issues that we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. next year when we're out for bid on that. We want to make sure that we have some flexibility. But we've also talked, I think, as this group and with the city manager about the potential use of funds to help offset and reduce the burden on the millage as well through the ARPA funding. So there's a lot of different pieces and parts that we could bring to bear. But one of the things that we're trying to pass along with the ballot information is to give people an idea of what that first year and that average cost looks like to make the level of investment that the community needs for those passes.
Well, one of your last comments sort of initiated my inquiry here is, we have talked about this $4.2 million portion of the slurf. I don't know how to say it. Sniffer, whatever those, well, that money that we got for free. And how to utilize that in regard to the overall package here. And I don't think that, at least to my knowledge, we've come to a concrete conclusion on how to do that. But that's part of the sausage making, and I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't part of what we're voting on today.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think, if you look at what's in front of you tonight and the ballot proposal, there isn't any commitment on using those funds one way or the other at this point. And everything that's been done in terms of looking at the estimated millage and the average millage from an estimated standpoint, were based upon, not using that. But again, I think we have an option of, because this would create a situation where the millage would be tied to exactly what the servicing of debt requires, that if you do utilize some of those funds to reduce the debt burden, you are automatically going to be reducing the millage for that. But again, that is a conversation that can still happen later on.
Okay. I'll have a comment or two after we make the motion, but that's all.
Okay. Nikki?
Why don't you?
Oh, Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Dave, thanks for your presentation. Can you remind us again of from start of installation to completion of access? What's that timeline? Do you think that would take place?
Yeah, we're thinking 2 to 3 years, Tim, not to be able to put it exactly in place because, again, until we actually bid out the services, and we all know that there's a few things that are dynamics right now in the world and in the broadband area as well, as it relates to that there's a lot of federal funding coming down to help a number of communities, including rural areas, with broadband deployments, so that we know that buying equipment, but also buying the services of actually installing those is going to be dependent upon what kind of bid response we get back from construction contractors. That we would be doing the engineering and then doing a phasing plan and putting it out to bid. But we're estimating, based upon the consultant's review that we've had to date, of about a 2 to 3 year deployment for that, starting later in 23. So,
thanks.
Yeah. Mid to late 23
Would
is
help
the start.
knowing my address help?
Yeah, I imagine we'll get a lot of calls with people that will.
We're just not sure which direction it would help, Tim.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you will then, if this vote will be August 2 for the millage, you'll have quite a PR and educational rollout with this website.
HollandCityFiber.com is available tonight, and there is other information that we've already worked with our great city AV team to put together some videos, and we'll continue to be doing that. We'll be, Pete is actually coordinating some meetings at the library and other areas of the community. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We want to make sure that you actually vote yes on this tonight. But once we do that, certainly we'll be having more public outreach for that on education.
Scott?
Yeah, so just 2 points of clarification need to be made, but and then one question. The first thing is take rate needs to be 51% to reflect the numbers that you provided, correct?
On the operating cost, that's right. There is a relationship of take rate and operating cost on there, but again, that take rate and operating only really affects the operating cost, not the actual, the $24 million, because again, if there's a positive vote on that, that'll be, absorbed by the millage. Essentially, we'll be taking care of that portion of it.
Okay, and this is a significant investment in the community, whatever funds that we use to do this, whether we use millage funds and or ARPA funds or other acronyms that we might, SIFR funds, whatever you call it. But go to your point is when we talk about the pass, not the drop, but the pass going through the neighborhoods, is everyone going to be equally assessed or started their assessment process immediately upon the passage, or only when the pass goes past their street or their road?
I don't know the answer to the city's ability to do anything other than a citywide assessment for that, or citywide millage, I should say.
Yes.
Not assessment, but a
Yeah,
millage.
so the technicalities of how that would work, Scott, is should you approve the resolution to put it on the ballot? Question number one. Question number two would be the actual vote of the citizens on August 2. And then that would authorize us to, on the one hand, kind of operationally not only go out and design the system and gain bids, but it would also authorize us to go out and actually go out to the bonding market and get that. So we would then start collecting the taxes, and there's not an ability in a millage rate to kind of pick and choose or phase that in. We would start collecting those taxes, and then ultimately that would pay for the costs that we're incurring of designing and beginning to construct that. And that would be kind of that community level investment that Dave talked about several times, that everyone shares in that cost. And again, that's a relatively simple calculation, right? It's the taxable value of your property times that 1.5 mils, which I think Dave did a great job of explaining. That's really what I'm going to call a worst case scenario as it's laid out in the resolution, where we're taking a look at an amount where in a supply chain environment and raising cost of money environment, obviously we want to have the assurance that if the community votes for this, we need to have the ability when we bid it out that we can actually build what we're saying we're building. The resolution is also very clear, though, that ultimately the only thing that we can levy is the cost, levy and collect,
Right.
is the cost of what that debt is ultimately. And that debt then would be whatever ends up the bids that come in, less whatever grant money or other monies that's applied to that. So any money that's applied to that is just going to drive down that millage rate. And then basically that creates the system that the community would own. And then every individual would have the choice of the drop and then securing that service. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just want to make sure everybody understands that they may not get that service or that opportunity, but to be paying for it early on in the on the assessment. And so just as the general public, just make it very clear that you may not get that pass and or drop to your residents until 2 years later.
That's correct. I mean, it's a matter of sort of looking at, the community investment in the infrastructure to provide the opportunity for access for all is kind of being somewhat separated from the actual service that's being provided. And that's what we're asking, what we'd be asking and you'd be asking the voters to decide, is that this sort of approach is a worthwhile mechanism to ensure that everybody has access.
Okay, and the part two is the drop. So we keep talking about where we want to work with our other providers in the area. We want to make this an open network so that they can take advantage of it. So when it comes to the drop, they have infrastructure themselves coming from wherever the pass is that they have to the drop of the house. Is there any way to piggyback on what's already there, or is it do we really have to replace the entire drop and then charge the homeowner the additional cost of the drop?
A lot of the drops today are going to be copper in nature. I mean, we're looking at, there is some fiber infrastructure in roads in certain places, but actually to the house, there's not a lot of that really worth sort of either taking over or buying or whatever it is as part of that. So that we're looking at a full fiber connection throughout the street as well as to the home all the way to the premise. And so, that's what that $800 and is buying you, not only the fiber, but also the network or the electronics that are at the home premise as well. But that would be a fiber connection at that point that we would, as a community, own. And then again, the providers would utilize not only the passes, but also go onto the drop to get to the home.
Okay, and so the last thing is, obviously in the home, you have to have the ability to connect to the network. Those devices, those are going to be provided by Holland Board of Public Works and as part of the OAM that's included in your fee, correct?
Just as we do today, the actual on-premise equipment that is part of that $820 includes a device that has a Wi-Fi capability to it, so you may be able to connect right to it. It also has ports that you can then do internally cabling in the house, to that as well. Those would be a homeowner, responsibility from that device on. As we do in other areas today, and I'm looking at Pete just to make sure that'd be the case, we do allow for some extenders from a Wi-Fi perspective as well for an additional fee that we do with certain customers that maybe have a large premise that they need to cover with additional Wi-Fi capability. But we also have, we'll have people that help those that want to provide their own extenders to that system as well, with any technical support, that they might need. But those are offerings that we do today in that core downtown area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I've got just a couple for you, Dave. One is, we're not new to this broadband thing, are we?
30 years that we've been doing that.
Okay,
so.
I've gotten some questions from people that have wondered whether the fiber that we've got in the ground is going to be obsolete and we're going to have to redo all of that stuff to do this. Is that the case?
No, the glass fibers last a long time. It's really the electronics that control the capability of that system, and we're seeing continued growth in that and in capability and lowering of costs. The principle of doubling of the capability and lowering of the cost. That's one nice thing about technology, is we continue to see that on the electronic side.
Okay, and we've had a lot of conversation about cost, and you talked about $25 million in your presentation, but we're looking at 30 here as
Yep.
the amount that we're borrowing. I just want to be really clear to the public that that's a maximum amount. Why put that buffer in there, just for clarity's sake? I know it's been discussed.
Couple things. We had what was in your packet. There is a updated. First of all, there's a 2016 report from company CTC, who was our consultants at the time. Most recently, as we were doing our outreach and engagement with the public, we had them update our estimated numbers for the deployment. And those are the numbers that you saw in the presentation, that $24 million that's there. That they believe at the time that we got that, and it was earlier in this calendar year, that they were conservative numbers. Since that time, I will say that our experience in dealing with fiber providers, of the actual materials that we're buying, as well as electronics, there are 20+% increases on some of those supply costs. So we wanted to build some conservatism in those numbers, hoping that by the time we move around to this, some of the supply chain issues will be worked out. But if it's not, again, to the city manager's point, we don't want to sell something that gives people an idea of here's what the cost is going to be for a millage and for the supporting services, without being able to actually fulfill that, should they choose to move forward with it. And that's why, looking at the millage parameters around that is really something that we believe gives us the best sort of conservative number to make sure that we can actually achieve the deployment of it, should people want to move forward with that.
And we've been looking at this expansion for a number of years. You just mentioned 2016 as running some numbers.
That wasn't the first time, yeah.
2019.
Yeah.
There are a lot of communities that are looking at doing broadband at this point.
There are a lot of communities. Ottawa County, as a county, is looking at that. Pete Hoffswell's been supporting some of the work that they've been doing there, as some, giving them input into what we've been doing and other things. Ted Seiler is actually sitting on the Allegan County task force that's looking at how to get broadband deployed. So yeah, a lot of communities are seeing this as a priority for them.
And so there are going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be vying for those same materials and those same limited number of workers that are out there?
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm leading you down a path here. Behooves us to try to get out in front of that wave of folks if we can?
It does, and that's where getting the approval for this, would do that. There still is engineering work that would have to be done, and I think there's also some assessment of the market in that, some things are demand-based, but then some things are supply chain-based, based upon, disruptions that are happening in those ability to make the products. If one gets done faster than the other starts taking off, there may be a sweet spot. But again, I think working with our engineering folks, when we get to the point of designing the full system for the bidding purposes, we'll try to hit that spot to lower the cost as much as possible.
Probably pretty fair to say waiting will not save us money on this deal.
Probably not, no.
Okay. I wanted to make that point for the public, but also the
Yeah.
fact that we're not rushing into this. We've
Nope.
been looking at this and planning for this well before. It was not a pandemic-inspired issue for us. That was a clarifying event probably, but we'd been looking at this prior to that.
It helped bring some, I think, like I said, clarity to the prioritization around it, for sure.
Okay, great. Any other questions from council members? Otherwise, I want to give the public an opportunity to be able to comment here as well. I think we're good.
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any members of the public who would like to address council in regard to this particular issue? It's been a while. Same rules apply, 5 minutes max. Only on this issue. We don't answer questions or engage in conversation, but we want to be able to hear your voice if you've got something that you'd like to say about it. Anyone who'd like to comment? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council in regard to the Holland City-owned broadband resolution approving a submission of a bond proposition to electors?
Move to approve.
Moved by Byrd.
Support.
Support by Airsource. Any discussion?
Your Honor?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hoekstra.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Dave and all of the staff from the city and BPW for working so hard to get us to this point. In my observation, over 18 years of seeing how BPW works, almost without fail, you bring these sort of proposals to us in the most risk-adverse states, and I appreciate that, even if I may have some disagreements or questions from time to time about the outcomes of those findings. I really do appreciate the character of those proposals, because it moves the train out of the station way far down the track. And this is, as we've said time and time ad nauseum, this is a project that probably rivals in importance snow melt and the new power plant, and maybe even planting tulips itself as a concept. Yeah, it's big. So thank you for that. And then just briefly, the reason that I asked my question earlier about the $4.2 million amount of money that has been suggested to be used to offset the millage, in my mind, first of all, it's pretty obvious that for this to be really, really successful, we need to have as many people participating in it as possible. We've thrown around 51% take rate. I hope that it's way, way beyond that. And the more that people use it, the less expensive it would be, I believe. But the better it's utilized, the better tool it becomes for our community. And going along with that initially is how accessible it will be for our residents to get hooked up. Now, as I look at the business plan and the proposal that we saw earlier, the slide, the $40-some monthly fee, to my mind, is extremely attractive. That's way less than I pay now just to hook up to the internet through a company which I won't name at this point, or ever probably. But that's not bad. $42 is not bad. But the thing that we have to recognize is that as we've come to understand especially through the pandemic years, is that the importance of this accessibility to the internet isn't just for us who want to watch movies because we're bored, or conduct business, or connect with the office. It's with folks who have to sit home with their kids rather than go into work. And in a income stressed situation like that, the ability to have this access is economically important. It's also important for the welfare of their children and their development years to come. So it may turn out that what's being proposed is the most viable approach and still be pretty attractive. But I, at least in the process, want to have the discussion. I want to see what those scenarios look like, if it's possible to apply some or all of those dollars to the hookup fee, for example. Maybe that's not possible, I don't know, but I want to know, and I want to see what that looks like. I want us all to be aware, as we're going forward, what all of our possibilities are and what the costs are, what they look like, so that we can make the best decision for the broadest range of our citizens that we can, and really take an incredible step, an incredible project to an even greater height. If we're going to do something, let's frickin' go big, right? Let's do it the best we can, within reason, of course, because we're reasonable people. So, you know, it's sort of like how much extra fat do you put in as you're making the sausage? That's what I kind of liken this to as we go through the process of discussion. But let's at least take every effort that we can to make ourselves as informed as we can as to the possibilities of the greatest impact that this will have for all of the citizens of our community. And God, it just can't come fast enough. So thank you.
Dave, I just want to make sure I'm clear. You're not proposing amending the motion that's on the floor.
I am not, because
Okay.
as I understand it, the business plan was mentioned in the proposal, but I don't think there's any specific action necessarily that we're taking to lock us into that.
Okay, I just want to be clear, that you're clear that what we're doing
Yes.
is putting the request to borrow up to a maximum of $30 million.
Right.
Right, okay.
Fully cognizant, but I appreciate the question.
Yes, all right, thank you. Other comments from council members? I've just got a couple to piggyback on what Dave had said, and in response to some of the conversation that we've had here. I've been involved in this personally since first stepping in as mayor. Had been going on prior to my time here. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of thought that has gone into this process and to get the proposal to where we are right now. And one of the things that I like most about it is the very simple analogy of roads. That what we're talking about is building roads and building a system of roads, and to kind of to tack on what you were saying, Scott, you know, do I have to pay for the road that comes until it gets to my house? Well, we're building a system of roads that are going to get all of us everywhere, and it's kind of a package that we're talking about paying for as a community for the community. Now, if you want a driveway from your house to that road, you can go ahead and do that, but that's on you, and what kind of driveway you want to your house is on you. And if you want to pay to get your packages delivered by Amazon or UPS or the Postal Service or whomever, that's on you. But what we're doing is we're saying, you know what, it's smart for commerce, it's smart for business, it's smart for people to be able to drive to grandma's house, it's smart for people to be able to get to school, for us to have a system of reliable roads that we as a community own and control and can invite everyone to use. As a small business owner, it has not been lost on me over the years that it is wonderful that I have a public street that runs right past my building that any one of my clients can use at any time to get from their place to my place. I got to pay for my own parking lot. They got to pay for their own driveway. We've got to pay for our own vehicles to get there. But the roads are provided by the community for the benefit of all of us. And I think that that's exactly what we're talking about putting in place here, is a system of roads in the new world of transportation, which is the internet, that are open to everyone. Yes, there's an investment, and it's a big deal, and this is a lot of money. But I see it as important and as groundbreaking and ground shaking as it was when this council decided at one point to put together a Board of Public Works to provide a system of electricity for this community, and a system of water distribution, and a system of wastewater. That's what we're talking about doing here, and that's a big deal and very important for the future of this community and the success of this community. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Corbin, Arnshorst,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, item 12E 6.4, the item that was removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Recommendation to allow restaurants in the F-CDT zone located on 8th Street to expand up to 3 parking spaces for the purpose of dining. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is recommended. This went through both the Parking Board, which is a subcommittee of the DDA, and then through the DDA. I'm going to hand this over first to Mr. Van Dyken, and I know that Amy Sasimoto has stayed through the rest of this meeting, and I'm sure that she would be either happy to either present or maybe answer any questions should council have this. But I'm going to turn it over to Matt at least to more thoroughly introduce.
Yes, thank you, Keith. Yes, this is a recommendation that comes to you first from the Parking Board to the DDA and then from the DDA to the City Council. As you all remember, during the pandemic, we had some pretty severe restrictions on the inside eating capacity for our downtown restaurants, and the DDA recommended to you that we allow seating to be out into the parking spaces along 8th Street for our restaurants and actually for some of our retailers for downtown as well. That was kind of an emergency process. It was great. I think it really helped some of our downtown restaurants survive the pandemic and actually thrive in the pandemic. But what we didn't have is a lot of structure around that process. So what this does is that takes the DDA recommendation to you to approve the use of those spaces for those restaurants around 8th Street. It actually includes an application process and then some fees that those businesses would have to pay in order to use that. And that actually gives us, as a DDA, some process to make sure that how those look and feel in our downtown are something that we could be proud of. So that's the recommendation basically that comes to you. There's probably a lot of it that I left out, so Amy is here. If you have specific questions, Councilmember Cookstra, you pulled this off the consent agenda, and we'd be happy to answer anything that you may be wondering about. I did see a few familiar faces in the back of the room as well that may or may not be willing to speak on this topic tonight, but I'm sure are very, very interested on your ultimate resolution of this issue.
Questions, Dave?
First of all, sorry, Amy, to make you stay all this time. This caught me a little off guard. As Nikki reminded me, back in the day when Jerome Kobus was here, those days, any time there was anything at all put on the sidewalk, placard, a sign, a chair, anything, that was, my gosh, that was verboten. It was the worst thing you could do because you needed to have the space. And we've there's two things evolving here. One is that attitude. We've since have had advertising signs and may have had a guy walking around with a sandwich board at one point. I don't quite recall, but the amount of stuff that we now have on our sidewalks has grown. The utilization of those sidewalks has changed in character, where we have all the way from a couple of benches to sit on to designated eating areas on the sidewalk, all of which I think are pretty cool. I have my experiences in communities where that's proliferated. It really creates kind of a cool vibe and a cool atmosphere in one or more communities. So I have no really problem with that. But I juxtapose that with the ongoing discussions that we've had about parking. And it's interesting that the parking group that brings this forward, it seems as though there's never enough parking. And the parking we have to hold on to with a tight grip, and it's necessitated the construction of 2 parking garages. And I'm not really sure if it's the lack of parking or the fact that you can't always park in front of the store that you want to is the real issue. But there seems to be a tension in my mind between those two things. And I get the fact that we instituted this during the pandemic because it was a unique circumstance and we had to do something to try to give a certain group of merchants some relief, some avenue to survive, frankly. But from what I understand, that's changed a bit too, where last year was one of the best years they've ever had, from what I'm hearing. So I guess the long and the short of it is, in theory, what's trying to be accomplished here is not a bad thing, and I would like to see more of it, frankly. More folks gathering on the sidewalk, being able to sit there and have their dinner or drink or whatever. But just as we've done with a lot of other endeavors downtown, you know, with the whole recreation of downtown many, many years ago, when Snowmelt was first put in, and subsequent efforts after that, it was done with a more extended thought process. We looked at it more holistically to see what is it that we need down there? How can we blend the uses together to make them as efficient and adaptable and safe, frankly, as possible? You have cars going excessively from time to time down there. I mean, when you blend 1,000-pound machines with frail humans, you know who's going to come out on the end if those connect. So in my mind, I guess, I'm thinking that I would like to see this progress, but I would like to see it progress in a more thoughtful method. I'd like to see some of our planning folks look at this more comprehensively and say, maybe it's a larger revamping of what downtown looks like. But it seems to me if we're going to do this, it's in some ways it's another stopgap measure. And there are certain circumstances where that's a good thing, and certain circumstances where you need to take a step back and look a little broadly at it. So that's the it's a long way of saying that's the difficulty I'm having with this proposal. It's not that I'm against the idea. I question the method, I guess. So that's it.
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, certainly.
So I didn't really hear a question in there, Councilmember Hoekstra, but I think I'll explain it, or I'll.
Didn't necessarily say I was going to ask a question.
Yeah, you were correct. I think you talked a little bit about the tension between parking and all the other uses, and from my perspective, I think there was a wisdom of a council many, many, many years ago that established a parking board and a DDA to actually come back to this council, to this body, with specific recommendations based to what they see as far as parking and how that downtown is run and operated. And I think this is a perfect example of that, where the parking board, and Amy can come up and fill in a little bit on this, but the parking board did deliberate at some length on this, and it has been on, I know it's been on the DDA's mind as a body. That's a body that I sit on for many, many months now, of what's going to happen with this. Is this going to continue? Are we going to do this? So I want to give you the assurance that this wasn't a simple, we had one meeting and then we had another meeting and then it came to you. There were a lot of people that use those parking spaces every day and work in that downtown every day, that did put some thought into this before the recommendation came to you. So again, I don't think I'm maybe necessarily answering a question, but maybe hopefully informing you a little bit more on the process and the deliberations that those two bodies took before it gets here. Because parking in Holland is a huge thing, right? And we've got people that are way on one side of it, and we got people that are way on the other side of whether we've got a sufficient number of public parking spaces downtown. I fall on one of those. I'm not going to tell you which one it is today, but parking is a hot button item, and the people that use those parking spaces for their own, businesses are the ones that are making this recommendation onto the city council.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt, and I certainly didn't mean to disparage the process that the DDA went through and so forth. But to fulfill my obligation, I will ask one question, though. The amount of funds for each parking space is how much again? I made you stay here this whole time, so you might as well say something.
Good evening. So this was done at looking at other communities that are doing the same thing. And we came up, or I'm not going to say we came up, the parking board came up with a recommended fee schedule that was then reviewed by the DDA. And for park, and also it's a shortened season. So it would start May 15 and October 1st. So we're talking about 139 days of being able to use parking spaces, up to 3 parking spaces. If you are going to use 1 or 2 parking spaces, you'd be charged $15 a day, whether it's 1 or 2, for a total cost of $2,085 for the season. And if you're going to do 3 parking spaces, you're going to be charged $20 per day for a total of $2,780. Those funds would be put back into the parking budget to try to offset some of the assessment costs and the maintenance of the parking lots, the parking spaces, plowing, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Vreeman, Mr. Byrd, and then Nikki, did you have a comment too? Okay.
Thanks for staying tonight, Amy. I know it's been a long meeting. I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit to the retailer side or opinion that might be opposing this. Is that true? Is it not? Are they behind you?
I do want to state that the boards, both the parking board and the DDA board, are made up of stakeholders that include retailers, landlords, property owners downtown. And the consensus from the people on those boards were that this was a good use because it helped everybody. The more people that came downtown to have a meal were more likely to shop. I'm sorry, I forgot the other part of your question. Is that it? Yeah, so I think the support was there through both the parking board, the DDA board, individuals that have come up to me and talked to me about it, certainly public support for the extra space for dining.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any business owners that were against this?
There have been people that have come out and said that I would think there's some retailers that feel like they should have the opportunity to do this too, which has existed since the sidewalk cafe ordinance went into place. So the amendment is to a sidewalk cafe ordinance that exists already. It's an expansion of an ordinance. We don't have anything right now for retailers. I will say we did open it up to retailers to have both parking space use and sidewalk use during 20 and 21 during the height of the pandemic. We only had 3 retailers that wanted to use the space because it's harder when you're a retailer.
So they're against it because they don't have the opportunities at this time?
I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Not universally though. There are maybe a couple.
Yeah.
I think the majority are in support.
Yeah.
Right, understood that. So looking at this pay scale, you have 15 for 1 or 2 spots and 20 for 3 spots.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand I guess, even if I'm not gonna use 1 space or 2 spaces, I'm going to get 2 spaces regardless. Help me understand the reasoning behind 1 to 2 spaces for the 15 and not a breakdown for each individual space.
1 to 2 spaces really more is a safety issue. 1 space to at least keep those spaces outlined and safe for dining. They may not put tables and chairs in there, but they're going to need the space to either aesthetically make it look nice or for a safety reason.
Okay. And going back again to the safety reason, so are there gonna be any kind of barriers between the parking spaces? So if I'm sitting here eating, is a car gonna be where Mr. Vreeman is to me?
We have to request, or not request, we're going to insist upon that they have a barrier of no less than 30 to 36 feet. Inches.
Will that consist of a certain type of material?
Yes, I think that what you also have to notice that all these applications will come into the DDA, then they will be reviewed by the Design Review Board to make sure that the materials are correct, not only for safety reasons, but aesthetically as well.
Okay. Then my last question is, how does this look during events? Tulip time, any parades, or even the, shoot, there was another event, I can't remember now.
It won't start until after Tulip time.
Okay.
So, and then it's only going to be up until October 1st, so it'll miss like the Christmas parade, things like that.
Oh, street performers, that's what I was thinking.
It would be open during the summer during street performers.
All right, so are there any other big events like that? Like, I guess any parades during the summer?
Memorial Day truck
Memorial
parade?
Day, parades, things like that, but they'll be in with the barriers that should be safe. They operated in the last couple of years like that too.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can envision, Quincy, what was in place really for 2 complete summers. A lot of the locations, the CRA had very effective ones. The 84 East had several. And in the report, it talks about the requirements that would need to be in place as far as barricades and separations and review of the Downtown Design Review Board. So that was all part of the recommendation.
Thank you.
Nikki?
I was just interested in the fee structure. So the owners don't find that 2002 onerous, or?
We got no pushback on the fee schedule. One person that attended, a restaurant owner that attended the meeting, asked if there could be an adjustment between 1 and 2 spaces and 3 spaces. So we made that adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn?
Wasn't there one restaurant that actually made an outdoor dining area permanent, took over some parking spaces?
There was at the far end
Yeah.
of 8th Street, by Pine Avenue, there was a restaurant that expanded. Once that road was reconfigured to only have turning lanes, they were able to request that those parking spaces be turned into their patio, which is always an option. Restaurants can come and ask for
Okay,
that use.
that's interesting.
But with that, and we've done it in the past, not for parking spaces as much, other than that instance, we've done it where planter beds have been
Oh, yeah.
asked to be moved for sidewalk cafes. That request can always be given or asked for. That comes at the expense of the owner that wants to do it. So it is a big expense to tackle because they have to snow melt it, they have to pave it, it has to go through those.
But that's good to know that there's a possibility, because I was thinking about what Dave mentioned as making it, maybe this wasn't what you meant, but what I heard was making some of these things more permanent, especially if there is ample parking.
That's
That might
true.
be kind of an.
That's
kind
true,
of
and that's something
interesting.
that would be weighed in. I think also, we have to remember that this is for a short time period, for 139 days, where all those other days, those parking spaces would be available.
But there's ample parking, you said.
I think so. I can give you the statistics on that, so.
Well, that would be interesting too. like,
Yeah.
If you keep track of the statistics over those 139 days, yeah.
And we could do that,
Yeah, that'd be
definitely,
great.
definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mr.
Thank
Van
you.
Beek has a comment?
Yeah, Matt plays a role and actually a voting member on some of these boards, so he said he wouldn't weigh in on his opinion, but maybe I will just, maybe I'll take the bait and I'll weigh in on an opinion, and really it's less a personal opinion, it's more just being a person in an office that gets a pretty steady stream of input from people that use our downtown, and really comparing that even to several years ago, 4 years ago, until some of the changes that have been made. I think pretty consistently, and I'm going to look at Amy here too, when the most current expanded block was extended and the work completed at the Civic Center, and I think anyone that goes downtown often, what you notice is that there's a lot more, and we're excited about it, parking that happens in the Civic Center and the other. The amount of comments that we get that are negative of nature about, boy, it's really hard to find parking downtown, really, even though I think some of us always scratched our head at that comment, because really what we've tried very hard to do is create a walkable downtown, and kind of by the definition of a walkable downtown, it's a place that you want to walk. We have very much seen, I think, a decrease in the, boy, I can't find parking downtown, because I think it's just much easier and people are enjoying now walking that last block going down to the Civic Center, and that creates more options. But I think the one time that we do see that sometimes you do want to have that parking is when this particular recommendation would not come into place, which it's winter, where sometimes people do like to, kind of have that extra nice parking spot right there. So I think this is where I know in a lot of the conversation, this was viewed as being something that supports something that's been proven very effective the last 2 years, and yet really tailors that parking for kind of the difference in those two seasons. So I'll take the bait, and I'll just weigh in a little bit with some information that I've heard from conversations from people.
All right, any other questions for staff? Great, thank you, Amy.
Sure.
And thanks, Matt. I do see a couple of familiar faces out there in the audience as well, so I want to open this up for public comment. If there's a member of the public who would like to address council, you've heard me give the rules multiple times. I'm sure you'll follow them. Please state your name and municipality for the record.
My name is Mike Fitzharris. I live in Holland. I have a business down here, opposite 84 East. Thanks for your time. And a lot of what I'm going to say, some of you council members have already said, but I feel like I want to repeat a little bit of it. We opened 84 East in 1993, 2 years after we opened the 8th Street Grill. So we've been downtown for 30 years now. We have a lot of history there. And during that time, we've participated. I've been on the PSD board. My sister Sharon has been on the parking committee. I've been on the DDA. So we spent a lot of time on those committees. We understand downtown. When on the board of the PSD, one thing I always did was support what was good for downtown, not just what was good for our business. And I think most people that know us understand that. And the one issue that has dominated over the 30 years we've been down there is parking from the very day. I mean, it's never stopped. I do agree, after spending many hundreds of hours in committee meetings and parking signs and changing things, it is a perception. I think parking now is better than it ever has been. The CVB, I think, put a letter of support in, and one of the comments that they made was they don't get a lot of questions. They don't have a lot of pushback on parking. When restaurants had to close for COVID, there was significantly less foot traffic downtown. I think everybody saw that. When the restaurants reopened, the people came back, there was more shopping. For 27 years that we've been down there, we didn't do anything on the sidewalk. And the reason we didn't do anything on the sidewalk, we never felt that it was a good situation if you have a table on a sidewalk in our area. We don't have a good area to put tables out. If a car pulls up and opens the door and hits your table, I mean, it's just not a good scenario. So for us, we never could do it. When the pandemic came along and you gave us the ability to have 3 spaces, it was a lifeline. It saved us. It really did. But it also showed us how important it was for downtown, for customers, and how much they like to be outside. I don't think that's going away. I mean, even if the pandemic wanes, which obviously it has, it's still going to be a big demand. I agree, going forward, probably the streetscape should be looked at, maybe in a different way. Maybe, you know, a committee can look at that. I know for us, it's just a tremendous source of customers being happy. The first thing they ask when they come in the door is, can I sit outside? You know, if they don't see a patio outside, they think maybe we have one out back, which we don't. So for us, I can't tell you how important it is. And I understand that, I mean, there's people that come in our place and say, I couldn't find any parking, but you know what? They got there. Yeah, they had to walk a block. They had to walk 2 blocks. They walked past all those stores. It's good for everybody. You know, we put 800 people a day average through our place in the summer. I know New Holland probably puts twice that many through. Dave puts through, you know, as many as we do. We bring hundreds and thousands of people a day downtown. Everybody benefits from it. I understand the parking situation. I understand a small retailer feels a little bit pressed when people come in and say, oh, I couldn't find parking. Sometimes it is, but I know one thing. When I decide to drive around Michigan and go somewhere, I never think about if there's going to be parking, because if I'm going there, it's because they have something I want to do. And if we ever get to the point where there's a lot of parking on Saturday and people can just park anywhere they want, we've got problems. I mean, right now we have a good situation. Downtown is still thriving. Fortunately, we all survived. And I think this would be good for downtown, not just for us. I think it'd be good for everybody. I took a lot of pride in our situation. If anybody saw what we were doing, we cleaned it every morning. When you're coming into downtown, we wanted it to look right, and we took a lot of pride in that. So we hope you pass it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council in regard to this particular issue? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
David Jurgensen. I live in Park Township. My wife and I own the Cara Irish Pub. We were basically saved in 2020 with the addition of the addition of the parking spaces, which enabled us to expand our patio and really stay in business. Last year, 2021, we were given the same opportunity. We really appreciate it. And what we saw was just how exciting, how much fun it was to be downtown with people on the street and people walking around, and you sit on the patio at our place or at Mike's place, and your friends walk by and they come and sit at your table, and I really think it made people want to come downtown and spend an evening, spend an afternoon. I think that's what all of us downtown are looking for, to be a place where people want to come and have a good time and do some shopping and walk around and see street performers, see their friends, have a drink, have a meal. That's what I think that's what it's all about. People want to sit outside in the summer in this community, and we certainly found that out over the past couple years, and I really don't want to see us go backwards. I want to, David, I want to keep the train moving. Keep the train moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council in regard to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the comment period. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this issue?
Move to approve?
As soon as we get a motion on the floor, you can.
Oh, I
Yep.
thought we did, okay.
Move to approve this motion?
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Discussion by council.
Yeah, I have one more question, which this discussion made me think about. So we're talking about parking spots in the front. Are we not? And I think of Butch's had a parking spot in the back. Some restaurants used parking on the south side of their establishments. South side of 8th Street used the back parking lot. Is that still anything that's going to happen?
Matt, are we just talking about on 8th Street here?
Just 8th Street,
Just
okay.
talking on 8th Street.
All right, good, thanks.
Okay. Any other discussion by council members? I just have one comment. I think it was a wise point by Mr. Van Dyken that a council prior to us, maybe not prior to Dave, but a council prior to me anyway, put together the parking board and the Downtown Development Authority, groups made up of stakeholders, who, as one of the commenters said, know downtown, are directly impacted by downtown, understand what happens downtown. And Dave, as you said, this was originally brought about by a unique circumstance. And sometimes unique circumstances call for creative and unique solutions that we discover are a really good idea. And I think this may be one of those. I mean, another example is Tulip Time's walking tours that I know Mr. Vreeman's familiar with. Tulip Time couldn't do motor coach tours, so they did walking tours just during the pandemic. But boy, it's turned out to be one of the most popular and successful aspects of the festival. And I think that this is a similar kind of a thing. And we've heard directly from the downtown merchants, the parking board, the Downtown Development Authority, that they think that this is a good idea. They think that the cost is appropriate. They didn't receive any pushback on that. And so I am highly supportive of this. Mr. Van Dyken.
Just for a kind of a point of order, just for clarification, this is the first reading.
This is just first reading.
This is the first reading with final adoption on May 4th.
Well, shoot, I should have made my big speech right now then.
May 4th can just go so much faster.
Just somebody save that for later. So the motion is for this to go on first reading. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Definitely yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful, thank you. Item number 13, communications from the city manager. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And because we still have a meeting to go after this, I will make this as brief as I can. First, I just want to extend my thanks to all of staff, but in particular Chief Messer, who kind of week number one, and Mr. Van Dyken there at the end kind of filled in while I had a once-in-a-lifetime experience out of country visiting my son who studied abroad this year. So thank you to both of you. In all seriousness, we have a lot of fun, but thanks for that opportunity. We also have budget review sessions, so immediately following this, we're going to go into the more informal setting upstairs in the training room. That is a public meeting, so the public is certainly welcome to view that. I would suspect maybe we'll take a 5-minute break in between, but we'll try to get that started as soon as we can, and then tomorrow night we'll complete that budget review in a meeting again in the training room that will start at 6 o'clock. Just to let you know, there were more comments again this evening. I won't address all of those, but neither the city attorney or I were at the council meeting last week, but we did hear a request and are working on that, and will be providing to council soon a response to some of the questions that you've had regarding the discrimination ordinance. And then ultimately, just because we've heard many comments from residents starting this weekend, and some of you have asked also, just want to let everybody know that apparently there were some huts that were placed on a property kind of as you go the other side of the expressway heading towards Hamilton in the city along M40. I think there's been some commentary about that in the public a little bit, and some questions definitely that we've had here at City Hall. And just so everyone is aware, we have not had any requests or turn in for information, except for the first contact that we had formally on that was the week of spring break. We had some information that was turned in to a staff member in Community and Neighborhood Services. We had a lot of people out during spring break, made contact back with that person and said, really, there was not enough information to even determine what exactly the question was or what they were proposing, which is what we would do with any question that comes from anyone about any use of property. We don't speculate on, if something's good or bad, or more importantly, if it meets regulations or doesn't meet regulations, and we don't make those determinations until we have complete information upon which to make that decision. So again, we just received some initial information, maybe not even 2 weeks ago. We asked for more information. My understanding is we haven't received all that information yet. So we certainly haven't approved anything. And anything that would need to, just like any other process, first it would need to be determined if it's an appropriate use in a zoning district or not. And that's really kind of like an orderly process. That would be the first determination that would need to be made. We know in this case, these are huts. Our understanding is that they're homeless huts, possibly for the homeless in the situation. There definitely would be building code things that would apply in this type of situation. And again, we're asking for more information as to if it would meet basic building code regulations. And then if it would get through both of those determinations, then ultimately, just like any other use, it would go through site planning staff, and or likely planning commission determinations. So just because we've had several questions about this since the weekend, just wanted to inform all of you, but also inform the public as to that process and a way that we would handle that process, just like anything else that would come into City Hall. And with that, those are the comments that I have this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Comments from the communications from the mayor. I just have a couple. I'm going to try to be even shorter than Mr. Van Beek was. Keith, I'm going to say this in the very best way with the best intentions possible. Thank you for taking a vacation. You deserve it. You have a very difficult, very taxing, very time-consuming job. You need a rest. You need a break. We need you to be sharp. And so thank you for doing that, and thank you for spending that time with your family and that time away. And along those same lines, Matt Van Dyken, thank you very much for filling in. And I think it's really telling that there was a week where both our city manager and our assistant city manager were both out of town. Chief Messer, thank you, Chief, if you're watching, covered the role of city manager. And I'm not sure anyone noticed. Again, with the very best, said in the very best way possible. That says a lot about this organization. That says a lot about the leadership. That says a lot about the three of you, that things run very smoothly and it's done. Things are done well enough here, and you've created such an incredible staff, an incredible system that things can run for a short period of time. Remember that, just a short period of time with you out of town. So I appreciate that. And on to appointments, motions, communications from council members. Mr. Corbin, I believe you have something.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Please accept the reappointment of Joel Davenport to the Holland Board of Public Works Water System Advisory Council, term to expire March 11th, 2027.
Move to approve.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Raymond. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other comments, communications from council members? Seeing none, we have no first readings of ordinances. One more motion that I would be willing to entertain at this point.
Move to adjourn, please.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
There is support.
There is support by Byrd. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned, and we will be heading upstairs for a study session and budget review. Public is welcome to join us. And we will be doing a 5-minute break in between.